What's up, guys? We are back with another review, taking a look at a brand new line from Wicked Cool Toys. We have got the Halo Spartan collection on deck today, and this is something that I've really been looking forward to because there have been Halo figures throughout the years and they've never really done it for me, but this line just sort of speaks to me. It's affordable and they're big and beefy and they honestly look pretty solid, so I'm pretty interested to take a look here. We've got three figures to talk about today. So we've got Master Chief, we've got the Spartan Mark V-B, and then we've also got the Spartan Mark VII. So these guys all come in the same style box. They've got kind of a very UNSC type of canister look, really. So it's all done in blacks and then the kind of army greens. You got the figure there in the window with the nameplate up top, the logo down on the bottom, and then the side has another small window with a little picture on the other side, and then the back of the box has got a product shot and then the cross-sell for the Wave, including Kat, which I did not find. I don't know if she's actually out yet or not. It was two Master Chiefs and the two other Spartan figures, so we'll see. But we've got three figures to take a look at, so let's do it. Let's pull them all out and take a look. And here we go, out of the package, our Halo Spartan series figures from Wicked Cool Toys and Jazzwares. And these are really interesting figures. They are all very different while still being very, very similar. So we've got our Master Chief here in the middle, we've got our Spartan Mark V-B and our Spartan Mark VII over here on the left. And they all share the same system as far as construction goes, but they all move slightly different because they all have different designs. There's not really much in the way of shared parts that I can notice on these figures because the armor is so very different. Of course, they all look very cohesive and they look like they belong together, but in terms of actually using them as action figures, there is a lot of different stuff going on here. I do think that they are not without their problems, but they do exceed and excel at looking really cool. There's a lot of cool stuff going on with these figures. So let's get into them, see what they're doing, see how they work, all that good stuff. So let's start with the Chief and go from there. So as far as moving this guy around, he is fairly standard for a modern action figure, but there are a couple of little hang-ups with this guy that just lend themselves to being problems when it comes to the overall design of the figure. He is a big, beefy guy in a very large, very specifically angled type of armor. So there are pieces of plastic that sort of cut into each other and overlap, which kind of presents a problem, specifically at the torso. He still moves around pretty well, and I'm really enjoying posing this guy. So you've got a head that can look up pretty good. I mean, for such a big figure with a thick old neck, it works really well. He can look down exceptionally well. You do have some tilt. It's minimal, but it is there to give him a little bit of attitude. And then you do have full rotation, but you're going to start to hit those shoulder pads pretty soon. So basically about, that's as far as you truly need. The arms go out at the shoulders. He does have these pads here that will sort of hit, so he really only goes out about that far. And then they do, of course, rotate all the way around. There is a butterfly joint. It's really just a forward butterfly, and it pulls out about that far, but it does help to get his arms across his chest a little bit. You do have your bicep swivel, and then we've got double jointed elbows. And while these work really well, they are a touch loose. They're not like loosey-goosey and flipping and flopping all over the place, but you can see, like, I'm not doing a whole lot, and this one's actually moving quite a bit. They do sort of lock into place, and the range of motion on them is really good, but they are kind of loose. You've got hinges and rotation at that wrist, and then at the torso, you do have a diaphragm cut up here, but it doesn't do a whole lot because he's so tight to the actual midriff of the figure itself. So when you twist him, you really have to twist hard, or he doesn't really do a whole lot. He goes backwards slightly, and he goes forward slightly, and then you've also got a waist twist down there in conjunction, but it's really locked into this sort of crotch girdle belt area, and he really, on a good day, you're probably going to get him to go about that far. And it's decent. You can get him into a running pose, you can get him into a walking pose pretty well, but it is still very, very tight. The tolerance on that is pretty crazy. The legs go out about that far. It's just a ball peg, so it's a barbell between the crotch. They go out about that far, they kick forward about that far, and then they do go backwards a little bit. There is a thigh cut here, but he's going to hit his crotch, and he's going to hit, his sort of butt plate there. So the joint is actually here in the crotch, and then the thigh cut is the actual leg itself. So these two are socketed together. It does help quite a bit, but it's not full because it's not an actual cut at the thigh. It's not that kind of thigh cut. So you've got a thigh swivel, I suppose is a better word for it. You've got knees that go back about that far. It is kind of an ugly joint, but it does move these big honking legs pretty well. And then you've got rocker, and you've got hinges down at the ankles. Hinges pretty good on Chief. Goes backwards really far. Doesn't go too far forwards, but it's pretty good. And then you do have your toe articulation. So he does move around pretty good. If anything, my one area of concern with probably all of these figures is just the torso, because there is a really tight tolerance there, and moving those pieces around, I kind of worry that I'm going to scratch the plastic. And then we do have slightly loose elbows on this figure. Otherwise, though, I mean, I'm pretty happy with the way he turned out. He does move around pretty well for what is essentially the first offering from Wicked Cool Toys. I mean, I'm not really familiar with them putting out anything like this, really. So I'm pretty excited and pretty happy with this finished product as far as his overall construction. Now, aesthetically speaking, this is where just everything is kind of ramped up, because I do think that they did an absolutely fantastic job on this particular figure. Honestly, on all three that we're going to talk about, I'm really happy with the visual aspect of them. Not only is this guy quite large, which does help in terms of scaling with other lines, because Chief is not supposed to be an average human height. He should be taller than most normal people, and this figure definitely is. It's between 6.5, 7 inches tall, so he is going to scale really well with standard dudes. And I think this guy just looks fantastic. The sculpt work on it is really nicely done. Again, like I said, there's not really a lot, if much of any, in the way of part sharing between these three Spartans. So you're going to see a lot of unique stuff on this figure. You do have a ton of weathering all over him. And I mean, I'm not sure if it's the best choice of color. I kind of wish it was black, honestly. There's some that are darker than others, and I've seen someone with this already kind of put a nice black coating over him, and it makes him look really kind of grizzled and battle hardened. But I do still like the fact that he is not just factory fresh Master Chief. This guy has seen battle. He's got scuffs and nicks and gouges on his armor. There are some interesting aspects to the figure. He does have a peg on his back for his gun, so you can peg his gun on there, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then he's got these guys down here that you can take out and turn around, and you can peg his sidearm onto his thigh. They don't sit all that flush in there, but this is a really interesting way of doing this. So you don't have to have that peg exposed all the time. Pop that piece out and put it in, and then you've got a flush piece of armor. Otherwise, you've got the peg to store a weapon, which I think is really cool. And like I say, I really dig weapon storage on my figures. I do, in a general sense, just like the way this figure looks. I like this armor design, and it's very much quintessential Halo, quintessential Master Chief type of look. The helmet, I'm really happy with this, because there is one key aspect of this that I'm not exactly sure what they did here, but the visor on this particular figure is just tremendous. It is definitely a separate piece. I'm not sure if it's vac metal or not, but it really looks like it. It is super reflective, very vibrant, and just has a crazy sheen to it. I mean, it's basically a small mirror stuck to the front of this figure. The helmet in general, though, has a nice sculpt, good paint applications, lots of little details as far as all of like the ports and the lights and things on there, and then he does have more of that weathering on top. So I do think this guy looks really good. To give you an idea of what he looks like as far as just with a normal kind of cannon fodder type of figure, here he is with a Cobra Trooper, just for size comparisons. Real quick, I'm not going to go into too much comparisons yet, but just to give you an idea, there he is. He's, at least a head taller than a normal guy. So I'm really happy with the way he turned out size-wise, but not to mention the fact that he's just really well sculpted, and I'm really happy with the overall aesthetics here. And then as far as accessories goes, this is one area where I was kind of surprised, because for an initial offering for this particular line, they come with a lot of stuff. And it kind of reminds me of the Fortnite stuff that Jazzwares does, because those figures are absolutely loaded. And these guys are as well. It's not tons and tons of weapons, but there is a lot in the box. So to start with, we'll talk about hands. So he's got trigger finger hands in the box. You do get a set of fists, and they've all got the painted armor on the top of the hands there. He's got a set of open palm, kind of splayed finger hands, and then he's got a it's a left hand, which is kind of like a saluting type of expression, or, you know, just another style post kind of hand that you can use for chief. And this is a unique hand for this particular figure too. And then he's also got, of course, some weapons. He's got his sidekick gun here, so done up with black and then green. And again, this can fit on the peg here. So what you do is you pop this guy out, put that on, and then you can put, well, not on this side, but you can put it, put his gun on his leg. Pretend it's on the other side. That works a lot better. So you've got the option there, and I just think that's a cool system. It's different, and it's a really unique kind of way to implement that. So you've got that, and then we've got the machine gun, which is done up with black and gray. Good sculpt on it. He can hold it pretty well. It seems kind of awkward in his hands, but once you get it posed, especially in a two-handed pose, he's going to hold on to it really, really well. And then all the guns for all of these figures have a hole on them, and Master Chief has got a peg on his back, and you can pop that on there. The peg hole on the gun is kind of shallow, but I haven't had too much issue with it staying in there. It stays just fine for me so far. So you've got a total of 7 hands, 5 extras, and then you've got 2 guns. So definitely a little bit more than I was expecting. Certainly not an entire armory, but I'm really happy to get all these extra hands. I love having the options when it comes to this figure. And yeah, it's a pretty solid array of accessories for this first offering. Next up, we've got our Mark VII Spartan, and this one honestly might be my favorite of the bunch just because I like this armor, and something about the red color scheme kind of does it for me. But this is a very similar figure, again, to Master Chief, just different suit. So let's see what this one can do, see how it moves around, because it does, like I said, move a little bit different. So the head on this one can look up really far as well. He can also look down really far. This one has a little bit more tilt side to side, and then full rotation. Nothing gets in the way on this particular figure. Arms go out at the shoulders. There is nothing that's going to stop this particular one from moving all the way out, so you've got nothing hindering him there, even with the pads there, and they do rotate all the way around. I will say that one area, like with the elbows on Chief, this guy has a kind of loose shoulder for this figure. You've got a butterfly joint in there, and it just moves forward and backward just like Chief, and then you've got your bicep swivel. We've got our double jointed elbows, and these are not quite as loose as Chief, but they also don't move as far either. So there's a little bit less range on these, but they seem to be a little bit tighter. Then you've got your hinge and rotation at your wrist. We've got a different system when it comes to the torso, because this one seems to be a little bit more locked down though. So the actual diaphragm cut doesn't really do a whole lot. Mine just sort of goes backwards and forward in a bobbling motion and doesn't really tilt or anything at all. He does move a lot better at the waist though. There's really not a whole lot getting in the way. Eventually it kind of tightens up at the kind of girdle belt area, but he moves a little bit more freely. So that's one difference. Legs go out a little bit further than Master Chief. They do kick further. They are, again, just ball pegs, so I've popped that one out. So there you go. You can see they just pop out. They kick forward. They kick backwards, not nearly as much here, and the thigh swivel is not as much on this figure as it is at Chief. So you've got just a little bit there, and then you've got your double jointed knees again, and then we've got our rocker, and you've got hinge. Again, really good on the back, a little bit on the forward, and then you've got your toe articulation. So they're very similar, don't get me wrong, they're very similar, but they are slightly different just because of the design. So this one is a little bit more freed up in a few areas, while a little bit more locked down in a few others. So it's kind of a give and take when it comes to how he moves, but I've still been able to get him into some pretty solid poses without too much fuss. As far as the overall design, though, I'm very much happy with this one. I think he looks really solid. He has a lot of weathering and wear and tear, just like Chief does, but this one seems to be a little bit more so. His armor has very much kind of been through the ringer. Tons of silver dry brushing on here to give him a lot of like a wear and tear and just kind of a rundown look, which I do like quite a bit. The overall design is very nicely done. Again, like I said, I do just like this suit of armor, so the design lends itself to just being a pretty cool toy. Colors are very consistent throughout. You do have, of course, the red, the black, and the gray, and then all of that silver overwash. And he looks good. I really dig the kind of spine work that runs down the back, all these plates. He does have the same kind of things that Chief does as far as the little ports on the side. I cannot for the life of me get those to come out. I'm not sure if they're supposed to, but this is a separate piece. All three of them actually have something like this, but these do not want to pop out. They do not want to come out of this one. They're either way too tight in there or they're not meant to. He also, this one doesn't really come with anything that I think I'd want to put on his thigh anyway, but there you go. If someone knows, let me know. He also does not have a peg on the back. There is a separate piece here, but it doesn't want to come out either, at least on my figure. And then as far as sizing goes, he is just as big as Master Chief, really, and so it's got a good shelf presence, very imposing when you put him next to a normal humanoid type of character. But then for the helmet, this is probably the reason why I like him so much. I really dig what looks kind of like almost like a motorcycle helmet, really. So there's a lot of dry brushing on it as far as the silver goes for that weathering, for that wear and tear, and then the nice fades from red to black look really cool. And it's another instance where whatever magic they worked with this visor, if it's actually vac metal, I mean, that's just the coolest thing to see that again, but it's so close, it looks so much like it, that I'm really happy with what they did here. I think the effect is really well done, how bright and vibrant and reflective and shiny it is. It just really, really clinches a cool factor for this figure, because, I mean, for me, you're instantly drawn to how bright and shiny that helmet is, and it's all in part to this visor. So they did a really good job there. It kind of crowns and tops off a pretty solid looking figure. And then for accessories, just like with Master Chief, it's the same type of thing. You get a couple guns, but you get a lot of hands. So out of the box, we've got more trigger fingers this time around, and then we've got a right hand, flat palm, kind of karate chop style almost hand, and then you've got a set of fists, and you've got a set of the open palm, kind of splayed finger, cupped style hands. So you've got 5 extra hands, a total of 7. You've got the machine gun here, which is done up kind of like Chief's, just the dark gray with black. It also has the hole on it, so you can, plug that in. Basically just a Chief so far. I still can't find any pegs on any of the other figures, so if someone's found a mystery port on a figure, let me know, but none of mine seem to want to open up. So you've got that, and then you've got this big honkin' pistol here, which I think is really cool. This is probably the one that I plan to use with this figure more often than anything else. Kind of a dark gray with a lighter gray color scheme. So the guns are a little bit on the dumbed down side when it comes to paint and colors, compared to the actual, very vivid colors of the armor, but he comes with a solid array of accessories. Again, it's a lot of stuff in the box for such a new line, and it was a really big surprise. And then last but certainly not least, we've got our Spartan Mark V-B. So this one is another instance of the figure being quite similar, but moving very, very differently. And this one's also the one that I have the most issues with as far as QC potentially. So he does have some problems. So as far as moving him around, his head looks up a little bit. It does not move up as far as the other two, but he looks down really good. You've got a really good amount of tilt side to side and then full rotation. The arms go out at the shoulders, and they of course swivel all the way around, and then you've got your butterfly joint here. We've got our bicep swivel, but he's got super, super loose elbows. These, like this one, it holds once you pose him. Like, I've not really had any issues posing him with a gun or him standing around, but it's still loose. And they're not both as bad, but they're both not great either. So this one's still a little bit loose, but it's not as loose as this one. And then you've got your hinges, and you've got rotation at those wrists. Standard stuff there. His diaphragm cut, though, is really squeaky, but it moves really well. So you can swivel him a little bit side to side. He's got really, really good tilt, a little bit backwards and a little bit forwards. But his waist twist is almost non-existent. He does move a little bit, but he doesn't really move much at all because of how tight everything is. Like, there's this plate on his back right here that kind of locks into these plates right here. So he doesn't really move too well at the waist. But the diaphragm cut makes up for it, whereas on the other two figures, it was kind of reverse. The legs only go out about this far. And they are constantly popping out for me. They go back in just fine because it's just a ball peg, but they're constantly popping out because I keep trying to move them and realizing, oh yeah, it doesn't go that far. They kick forward only a little bit too because of the design on the legs. You really have to twist them and get them to kick outwards, sort of. You've got to kind of get them just to splay outwards, and then they kick backwards a little bit. There is a thigh cut up here, or a thigh swivel, I suppose, and then you've got about that far. The knees go back just as well as the other ones do. And then you've got your rocker, and you've got your hinges down at the ankles, and you've got toe articulation. But that's another area where I have a problem on this guy because of this. This one does not work at all. It might as well just not even be there. Granted, I'm not a huge stickler for toe articulation, and it's certainly not a stability thing, but still, I mean, it's sort of not all that good looking when it's sort of flopping over like that. But otherwise, he moves about as well as the others. I do really like the way he can move up here at the torso compared to the other two, but he still has a few weird issues in terms of what just appear to be some QC problems. And just like articulation, aesthetically this figure is also different because the other two are incredibly weathered and just battle scarred. This guy is not. He is very factory fresh Spartan armor, which is fine. I kind of prefer the battle worn look on these types of figures, just personal preference, but he still looks really good. Sculpt is fantastic. There is a lot more little paint detail on this figure as far as little marks, little dabs of blue all over the figure, things like that, the gray, and just little differences that kind of add value to this particular figure from a paint perspective instead of all just having a bunch of silver dry brushing on him. So it's kind of a, two halves of the same whole, basically. The legs, everything, the arms, all very different from the other figures because, again, these are very similar designs, but very much unique amongst themselves. So you get stuff that very much kind of works together as a unit, but at the same time you can pick them apart. So I do like the fact that we are seeing so many unique things in this line already. My only true problem with this figure is some of the loosey-goosey nature of the joints. And then you've got more of the same when it comes to the helmet up here with the separate piece for the visor, only this time he has a silver visor instead of the gold coppery visor. So it's a little bit of a different look, a different shine, but it's just as impressive, it's just as lustrous and just as reflective, and he's got a very unique helmet design as well. So they all kind of have their own strengths and weaknesses when it comes to the design, but I really can't get over what they did with these visors. It's very much a huge selling point visually when it comes to this line, because I really can't get over it. If it truly is vac metal, I mean, that's a selling point on its own because you never see it anymore. But even if it's not, whatever they did mimics it pretty much perfectly. So this guy does look really good. He's got a great design to him. He has a little bit of weathering on his legs, I suppose, down here, but he's not nearly the same type of look as the other two figures. Very much a more new type of figure or suit of armor versus the other two, which are quite a bit more battle-torn. And then as far as accessories goes, just like with the Mark VII, he's got the same kind of accessories. So you've got the trigger fingers on him in the box. You've got a set of splayed finger hands. No paint on these hands. They don't have any armor that's painted on the top of the hands. You've got a set of fists, and then you've got the open palm karate chop style hand. He does have two weapons as well. You've got the rifle here, which has quite a bit of paint on it compared to some of the other guns. So there's greens and different shades of grays, and then kind of the gunmetal-y color. Again, another hole on it that can peg onto whatever peg you can happen to find. I still don't know where this one might have one. You've got that separate piece right there, but I can't get it to pry apart. I've got separate pieces here on the thighs. Can't get those to come out either. Again, don't know if they're supposed to, but they look like they should. And then you've got a plasma pistol from the Covenant. So we've got the first one of those, which I'm really happy to see one of these already. It makes me hopeful that we're at least going to get an Arbiter or something in this line. But this guy looks really good. Sculpt is, of course, very unique compared to the other guns. And then a much, much more different color scheme with the purples and the light blues all over it. So I'm really happy with this gun, and I'll probably use this quite a bit just to shake things up a bit. So par for the course when it comes to accessory count, but he's got unique stuff in terms of those guns. And then for a few more size comparisons before we wrap it all up, here they are with another 6-inch scale figure. So you've got the Mando, the Beskar Mando, with old Din Djarin. So you can see that they very much kind of tower over him. And with another 6-inch scale figure, just to keep things a little bit more consistent, here's our Zeo Ranger 5. And again, more of the same, very much bulkier, very much taller. And then how about a much bigger figure? So here they are with Monster Venom. You can see that, they still very much stack up to him. He's not too much bigger than they are. He, of course, has a lot of bulk on him, but they are very, very beefy figures. And then for something maybe a little bit more their scale, here they are with the Super 7 Hordak figure. So an actual 7-inch figure, and you can see they very much almost tower over him. They really come right up to the top of his head, and they have a little bit of bulk on him too. So they still look really imposing and very much tall figures. So they're going to scale really, really well alongside other larger figures, but then they're going to work really well with other figures that are more in line with a traditional 1/12-ish style scale. So overall, I am pretty happy with these figures. They are definitely not without some issues and room to grow, but for a brand new line from a company that I don't really think is very well known for this type of figure, Wicked Cool Toys is not known for 1/12-ish scale figures that are relatively super articulated. This is a really good first outing. They all have kind of weird articulation in some ways. They all have something that's a little bit more limited than the next, and then there are a few QC issues in terms of some loose joints here and there. They don't, however, have any QC issues when it comes to paint for me. They all very much look fantastic in a visual sense. They have a great array of accessories, and frankly, for 20 bucks, you're getting a lot of figure for each one of these Spartans. So I am pretty interested to see where this line could go. Granted, I don't know how many Spartans we truly need, but I'm up for a few more, and hopefully, like I said, we might get an Arbiter out of this down the road, and maybe some Covenant type action. So I'm really curious to see what's going to go on with these, and I am, again, pretty happy with this first foray into some new Halo figures. So that's going to do it for this look at the Wicked Cool Toys Halo Spartan collection. Let me know what you guys think. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share, and until next time.